Hello, I am Simulator Deck, and hello from the Shaky Isles, the land of the long white cloud, or my neighbours to the east. Call it what you will. Kiwi land, New Zealand. Yes, we are in New Zealand, which is surprising to me as well. So, I did mention this on a very recent episode. There is a line that is 55 miles long that is set in New Zealand. Now, the train that you can see in front of you, I have featured before. It's by Chris Trains, and it is an Auckland diesel multiple unit, which would have existed before the electrification of the Auckland rail system. So this train is payware. It's not a part of this pack. This pack itself is a DLC. It is the cost of other Train Simulator DLCs, so $56 Australia, whatever that happens to be in your local currency. But we're going to take this train, this Auckland train, which, you know, is sympathetic to maybe not the time period, but certainly it is a New Zealand train. And what we're going to do on this episode, we're going to explore the whole route, and then in coming episodes we'll do the scenarios, and that will show you the trains that are on the route. We'll turn our headlights on now. Now this is Springfield. Now there looks to be a more modern building down the back. This is the result of about 4 years' work by a team of New Zealand rail fans. So here is our diesel multiple unit. We have featured it on a couple of episodes before. It is separate from the route. Now, a couple of days ago, as I'm recording this at the end of January, it was announced that this route was coming soon. I didn't expect coming soon to be a couple of days later. I expected it maybe a month or so down the track, something like that, pun slightly intended. So we'll have a look around Springfield first. It's more of a 50s/60s era that the rest of the area is modelled on. So we'll get into the cab shortly. We'll just have a pan around and show you the immediate area. Now, this is the first time that I've loaded the route, with the exception of the time. This is a quick drive scenario, and I had my quick drive scenario set to too late in the afternoon, and it was rather dark. So I have made it to be more like 9 o'clock in the morning. So let's get in the train, and we'll set our reverser to forward, and we'll release the brakes, bit of throttle, and we will go. So interestingly, we'll just apply a little bit of throttle. The train itself is in kilometres per hour. The heads-up display is in miles per hour and in miles. So off we go. So over a level crossing. Now when it comes to railways in New Zealand, even though New Zealand's so close to me, it's about 3 hours in a plane away. I've only been once. And I went to Auckland, spent a few days there, and then I went to Queenstown and spent a few days. And it was nice, it was awesome, but I haven't done a lot of New Zealand and I would like to. But I love the people, watched lots of documentaries and TV shows and that sort of thing, and when you go to New Zealand, because it's so similar and it's Australia and New Zealand are so close, you feel like you're in the cities, at least you feel like you're in another part of Australia. Then you go into the suburbs and you go beyond, or you go somewhere like Queenstown, and the scenery is just rather spectacular. So we'll just coast for the moment. So 55 miles of track between Aickens, which is where we're going, and Springfield, which is where we just left. So we're just doing this to show you the route. Now we've got a yellow signal coming up. I could imagine that this would be fairly similar to Australian signalling. We'll put some brake on. We should go outside for a little bit. We've got a little bit of a way before our next signal, and then we'll react accordingly. Outside of the major centres of New Zealand, lots of single track. But based on what I've seen, you can feel like you are, oops, we'll go the other way. We'll just take the brakes off. Now obviously I wasn't born during the period that this is modelled on, but you can believe that this is what it would have been like, and in some areas this is what it would still look like if you went down it today. So we're coming up to the Little Kowai River. Some of my Kiwi pronunciations might be a little bit off. So we'll reduce the throttle. We do have a 10 mile an hour section coming up. So we're going about 65, almost 69 kilometres an hour. We should actually start to brake. So we're coming in, we're reducing the speed quite nicely. we'll just release the brakes at this point. Lots of level crossings. We can see the signal ahead. Lots of little level crossings, as you could expect during that time. Many of them are probably still there, to be quite honest. So because a little bit of bird life, because we are on a single line and we can see a signal, we should be expecting a loop, and indeed coming up, Kowai Bush Loop is coming up. So where we will go, we will find out in a moment when we get to the signal. So looking forward to just exploring the map, getting to know the map on this episode, and showing you the scenery when we can. It's a very good view out of the window, and even the power points on the right hand side of the locomotive of the rail car. That's what the power points look like in New Zealand, because they're basically Australian power points as well. So that's what they look like. They look different to English and American power points, for instance. All right, so we'll start to put some brake on. The automatic air brake, the Westinghouse system, as some people might know it as. So we are coming up to a loop and the 10 mile an hour speed zone. So we'll just get a little bit closer to the signal. So we'll just get a little bit closer. And that will do us nicely. Now, as I said, I don't know New Zealand signalling perfectly. Now, I haven't read the manual or anything like that, but I am thinking that means we're set to go into the loop, the little L on the right hand side of the signal. That would indicate to me that we are allowed to go into the loop. Let's try it. The route is set for the loop, the track's set for the loop. So we will stop in a minute and we'll have a look. We're in no rush. We'll have a look outside. There's our train. Oops. So we've got a couple of sidings and the main line. And what would have been at the time so we'll take our brakes off. And this is what many of the country stations, I presume, would have looked like at the time. Now, interestingly, that there's not another signal another signal here preventing us from going on to the main line. There's just the signal here. I want to go full throttle. Now, does that mean we're able to go? I don't think we are. Request a pass signal at danger approved. Okay, so here we go. So maybe that's what you had to do at the time. You maybe had to call up and say, okay, I'm here. Have you got anything coming? Can we go? So it looks like all of the speeds, etc., and the speed boards are in miles per hour. I would have liked it to have been in kilometres per hour because that's what they use in New Zealand now. But having said that, back in the time, if this was modelled in the 50s and 60s, well, a lot of people would have used miles back then. So it's authentic to the period. Because what happened in New Zealand would have been very similar to what happened in Australia, and you know, the 50s and 60s are very much imperial, very much miles per hour and miles rather than kilometres. So this is my modern standard going, hey, New Zealand's metric, it's, you know, it's kilometres and it's kilometres per hour. What also threw me a little bit is that this train's a more modern train. Everything is in kilometres per hour and kilopascals and that sort of thing. So the expectation is that things would be in kilometres per hour. But thinking about it on the fly, the period that this route's based on, it would have been miles per hour. So we'll just back off here. Lots of windy curves, little viaduct just simply known as Bridge 14. Oops. We'll just apply a little bit of brake. We'll just take the brakes off and just release them. Now, what I did a few episodes ago when I used this particular rail car, I used a fictitious English railway that I had on Train Simulator. and then I used it on the, I think I used it on the Edinburgh to Glasgow route, which would have looked a little bit like New Zealand. But here we are. We have a New Zealand route on Train Simulator. I was expecting it to be like a freeware route, but it is not a freeware route. It is one that you pay for. So hopefully a lot of people who have been screaming out for New Zealand and Australian routes for many years will in fact put their money where their mouth is and show some support. And indeed, this is probably one of the first videos that has been recorded about it. It won't necessarily be the first released because I am keeping it on my release schedule, 43 miles an hour. We're just about there. Now we've got a 27 mile an hour limit coming up here. Now a lot of this would be because of the curves. And we are bringing the speed of the train down. A tunnel coming up. So we're in the tunnel, so we won't see a lot for the moment. A short tunnel. Must keep in mind that this is the first time that I've seen the route, so I don't know where anything is. I don't even know the area of New Zealand that this is modelled on. We'll just release the brakes at this point. No need for some throttle yet. Let's have a look at the Viet. Well, maybe that's not the best angle. Can we zoom out? We're about to come into some more tunnels shortly. So you can see that there would have been a massive amount of work put in. As I mentioned, it's about a 52-mile section. And the amount of assets that they would have had to have, first of all, find the assets. And then, you know, it's relatively easy to put just like a straight section of track, put the occasional signal in, you know, put the occasional station in or whatever, but then you've got the amount of curves that are on the line, you've got the scenery, you've got things like the telegraph poles and wires that are next to the track on the right hand side. You've got the trains themselves, and being the fact that it's not one of the major areas that Train Sim has been in before, you know, it's not a European route, it's not a UK route, it's not an American route. The amount of assets that would be available would be reduced, so you'd have to modify or make your own assets. So this is really pioneering stuff. And yes, it's not like, it doesn't look like an English route or an American route or whatever in how it looks, but if you were to go back to some of the earlier English routes or some of the American routes, you know, they would look like this. But this is something that the people who have worked on this project, that they can build on. They can get feedback from people who aren't them, and you know, there may be some other people who might have some expertise in some particular areas that may want to jump on board and help out and lend a hand and that sort of stuff. And you know, it's a thing that constantly can improve, and you know, even the developers behind Train Sim itself, they're constantly developing and improving. You know, some of the routes that they would have put out, some of the earlier routes that they would have put out, won't look like routes that you can put out today, and routes that you can put out today won't look like routes that you can put out in 5 years' time. So I'm quite happy to pay my $56. And this is the thing, a lot of people can say, oh, I want an Australian route, I want a New Zealand route. Okay, here is a New Zealand route. Have you put your hand in your pocket and have you paid for this? You know, if there's 5 people who put their hands in their pocket and there's 50 million people who don't, who said that they want a New Zealand route, did you really want a New Zealand route? I think you know what I'm trying to say. You know, you have to show some support to the people who have been putting their time and effort in to get to this point. Now, if this route goes absolutely gangbusters, remembering that Australia and New Zealand is a relatively small market compared to other places in the world, if there's a massive spike when this comes out, there may be some other people out there who think, well, okay, well, we'll spend some time making an Australian route, or making another New Zealand route, or making improvements to this route, or making their own route. You know, making a single line route with this amount of scenery, there's a speed reduction when we get out of this tunnel. I think it's great that we just got a Kiwi route that, you know, it's gone through all of the train simulator approval process, and they have mentioned, and you know, it has been found worthy of being put up for sale and also being promoted. And that's how I found it in the first place. So I think it was a good idea just to use this train on this route to start with. So we're coming up to tunnel number 6. We'll just throttle back. as we are speeding a little bit. Put some brakes on because our speed is increasing. There we go, we've reduced our speed so we can take our brakes off now. Now we've got some signals coming up here. The last one we did have was a yellow, so I should be starting to apply some brakes. Now I'm not sure what's going to happen here because the map that I'm using down the bottom has ended. So we're coming into staircase. Staircase approach east, staircase loop, and staircase back shunt west, which means we may actually have to change directions. We should apply some brakes. So we'll just release the brakes and we'll just roll down towards the signal, and then we'll find out what the game plan is. And because I haven't seen any other videos, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to wait now. We've got the signal into the loop. Possibly, no, I'm not sure. Let's have a look. Maybe we need to get a bit closer to the signal. So we'll just release the brakes. So it looks like we've got the signal for the loop, although I don't know how. So I've been authorised to pass the signal, but I don't know because there's another train there. So I don't know how this is going to work. I think we've stuffed up. We're gonna have to go backwards. Because we should have to be on the main line, because that train's there, so there's no way that we can do, well, there's no way we can take the loop. So maybe we should have waited at the previous loop for that train to come by. We'll go back behind. Alright, so we'll go back towards the signal. Alright, now if we go to the map, . No, we need the map. So we're all the way down here. We can see that train there. So what we need to do is set the points. Okay, so that's what we needed to do. And that was very good that I was able to do that. We got permission to pass the signal at stop. But what we had to do, and this would have been very common at the time I presume, we had to set the route ourselves because there's the train on the loop. And now I've set the train to go on the main line so we can indeed depart. So there's an important lesson for young players, is that sometimes you may have to set your own route. So that train was waiting for us. So this is staircase. And that would explain why the route disappeared on the map down the bottom. Because the route was set to go into the loop. There was a train on the loop so we could go no further. But now that we've set the track for the main line, we can indeed proceed. Need a little bit of throttle just to get up to the signal. Also had to do similar sort of things in the Japanese episode. The Japanese episode that actually features in the opening credits. So what we'll have to do here is get permission to pass that signal at stop. So we've called the signaller and they've said yes, we can go. So let's go. So this is tunnel 7. So we'll just throttle off here. There's a lot of bridges and tunnels in this section, so we'll just stay in this view for now. We'll reduce our speed. There's a 25 mile an hour zone coming up. Let's have a... Oh, that's cool. Oops. Oh, we'll turn the gauge lights on. I really haven't explored haven't really explored this train a lot. What it can do, some cab light, there we go. We'll pick up the throttle a bit. This would be the New Zealand equivalent of what I drive in the real world. Oops, going too fast. We'll back off the throttle. Kiwi rail overhead, traction wires, passenger train instructions. Another tunnel section coming up. Tunnel bridge 22. We're just crossing over now. Then tunnel 9. That make a difference? So we're just going through the long tunnel 9. Actually, what I should do, through the wonders of mobile phone technology, I should actually share with you some of the details of this route, which is available in game. While we're going through these tunnels. It's known as the Midland line. Discover the sights and challenges of historic New Zealand rail with NZTS Workshop's Midland line for Train Simulator. The Midland line is a 3 feet 6 inch gauge railway, narrow gauge, that traverses the rugged and beautiful Southern Alps on New Zealand's South Island. The line was born in the 1870s from the desire to reach farmland to the west, a desire that soon expanded and called for the east and west coast to be linked. The unforgiving terrain and intermittent funding caused construction to be slow, and it wouldn't be until 1923 that a train made its first trip from end to end. NZTS Workshops have brought the Midland line to life in Train Simulator, recreating the challenging 90-kilometre section between Aickens and Springfield, which is what we're doing now. including the 8.5 kilometre long 1 in 33 gradient Altera tunnel which burrows through the Arthurs Pass mountain range. Set in 1968, the Midland Line represents an era when all the steam age infrastructure and facilities were in place, but services were held by diesel and electric traction, one of each is included. And so we'll get into electric territory a little bit later on. There's 10 different scenarios. 90 kilometre section of New Zealand's Midland Line as it was in 1968 from Aickens to Springfield. There's an EO class electric locomotive which, if I read back, dated from 1923. We're not in the electric section yet, so we can't see it. We'll just go into release for the moment. There's a DJ class diesel locomotive which is brand new as of 1968, so a new diesel locomotive for the period. There's lots of different wagons and passenger coaches, 10 career scenarios, quick drive compatible. So that gives you a little bit of an insight of the period. So 1968, this is set in. So while we're here going through various tunnels, etc., I should give you a little bit of information about the train that we're actually driving. Okay, so you can get this via Just Trains. Now this is a Auckland diesel multiple unit. There's a narrow gauge version, which is this is a narrow gauge line. But in case you're running a standard gauge line and you want to run it on a standard gauge, you can as well. So I'll just do a bit of research while going through the tunnels. Okay, so the train that we're driving is an ADL or an ADC class diesel multiple unit. that was last operated on the Auckland Transport Network. They were originally used in Australia on the Perth Suburban Network before that was electrified. Between 1982 and 1993. They were then sold to Transrail by Transperth. They were actually built in Newcastle, which is where I am at the moment. They were originally constructed between 1982 and 1985, and they were starting to be used in New Zealand in 1993 and refurbished in 2002. 10 sets, capacity of 132 people, maximum speed of 90 kilometres an hour on narrow gauge, 1067 millimetres or 3.5 inches. 3 feet 6 inches rather, I should say. So there was also some older carriages that were also from Perth sent to Auckland. So the first refurbished unit ended service December 2002. So they're actually still in service for the moment, according to this. Between Pukekohe and Papakura stations. So you could still conceivably ride these rail cars, and so it doesn't look that out of place. You know, this is a train that was running in New Zealand. Yes, it's yes, it's more modern than the period that it's been modelled, but I thought it would be a good introduction to the route before we dive into the scenarios and have a look at the entire route first, and then on the next episode continue on. This is going to be a long one. You know, we've still got 40 miles to go, so we might end up breaking this into a couple of episodes. Just our initial exploration of the route. We've got some signals coming up, so we should get back in the cab and see what's going on up here. Green light, that's promising. We've still got 40 miles to go, so just over another hour of travel. So we've got the line set for the main line, so we can go straight through. This is Avoca. So what we might do, we might run through to the next loop, and then we'll continue on the next episode with this for the second part of the route. And then after that we'll continue, we'll do the scenarios, and then we will drive the authentic trains for the period that's being modelled. So realistically, when did I say these rail cars entered New Zealand? They were sent to New Zealand from 1993. So the period of the track and the scenery being modelled is 1968. And we'll just shut off here. So the period being modelled is 1968, and this train is from originally into service in New Zealand in 1993 and refurbished into the colours that you would see now in the early 2000s. See a river off to the right hand side of us. Let's go outside for a minute. Lots of spectacular scenery in New Zealand. We're going to have to reduce our speed. Our speed limit has just dropped to 34 miles an hour, although we're only doing 23, so we're good. And we'll have a look at this viaduct. If I can get my... Oops, just got to get the camera into the right position. We've got another signal coming up. It's clear. I'd like to think that it's clear. We should be the only train in the single line section, so I'd like to think that we're clear, that we're all good. What signals like that can also indicate, it could give us a little bit more warning about what's happening at the end of the single line section. time to throttle back a little bit. Lots of little bridges, little viaducts that we're crossing over. It's a stream running on our left-hand side there. Yeah, we'll go that view for a little bit. Some of the speed zones are quite short. You know, there may only be a difference of 2 or 3 miles per hour, but it's sometimes based on what the curve's doing. So we're all good still. So we are coming up to Craigieburn, which is where we'll end this particular segment here. Train-related content on Simulator Dirt on YouTube, simulatorgaming.com, is released on Thursdays. And so we're going to end the episode when we arrive at Craigieburn, and the next episode will take up from there to go back to show you where we used this rail car before in the New Zealand environment that we didn't have back then. Episodes 48 and 49 of Simulator Dirt Train Simulator is when we featured this diesel rail car previously. I was quite happy that that I found it online, just on Just Trains. I was quite happy about that, and I was really happy when news came out this week, as I'm recording the end of January, about this line. I didn't expect it to be so soon, and here it is. For what this is a pioneer route for New Zealand train simulation on Train Simulator. So I'm rather impressed for the first ever New Zealand route that you can publicly buy on trains via Train Simulator. So we are coming up to Craigieburn. So we'll slow things down here. Now we do have signals through here, so we can keep going. We've still got 35 miles to go, just over an hour of travel to get to the end. There's Craigieburn. So basically you can stop wherever you want. So I'm going to come to a stop here. We're going to have one final look of our train. We've got the loop on the right and another siding. So let's go outside. There's Craigieburn. There's our train that we're using as our tour train. I've been Simulator Dirk. You've been wonderful. We'll see you next Thursday for the continuation of this journey from Craigieburn in New Zealand. I've been Simulator Dirk. You've been wonderful. We'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.